Welcome to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast, where we talk with the nation's top experts about today's toughest parenting challenges. Whether you're concerned about your child's development, learning, behavior, or you just want to make family time more enjoyable, we share the practical solutions and tools that can help.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Stefanie Boucher, and in today's show, we are going to be talking about how to communicate and work with your child's pediatrician. Your child's doctor, of course, can be an incredible resource when you have questions or concerns about your child's health, but not everyone is aware of the many different ways in which a pediatrician can offer help to a child or family, or of the best communication techniques to use within the doctor-patient or doctor-family context. So we're going to be discussing all of that, and I just happen to have an experienced pediatrician here with me today. Dr. Diana McManus is a pediatrician who has been practicing here in Massachusetts for the last 12 years. Dr. McManus, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We are so happy to have you here today. I think the best place to start is probably from the beginning. New baby, new parents have to sort of go through the process of finding a pediatrician for the first time, having never had to choose a doctor for anyone but themselves before. How can parents make sure that they are choosing the right pediatrician for their child? What types of questions should they be asking before they make a selection? And how do they just determine a good fit?
Yeah, that's a great question and really important. I think that a lot of pediatric offices are offering visits with parents while they're still expecting, so before their baby's even arrived, as a way to meet and greet, so to speak, and get to know somebody, get to know the practice. I think that's a great opportunity to put a face to a name, get a sense for the person's style, get a sense for the person's priorities, sort of how they might handle certain situations. I know in my particular office, we talk a lot about how the practice works, what they can expect in the first couple visits, and then, of course, give parents a chance to ask any questions that they might have. You know, some things that are important. I think the number one important thing would be the trust that you have in this individual. Is this somebody that you feel like you can connect with? You feel like you trust their advice, you trust their expertise or their experience? That's the number one thing.
And that's sort of, in part, probably just a gut feeling sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah, right. A gut feeling. You know, I think talking to friends or neighbors about their own experiences with their pediatricians, not necessarily who they liked, but what they liked about that person can be a help, probably. And then, of course, convenience comes into it, right? Some offices might have doctors that only work on certain days of the week. So if you are a parent that always has a certain day off, you might want to make sure your doctor's available on that particular day. Find out about weekend hours if there are any different scenarios like that.
Right. I know when I was a new parent, I had a lot of questions about my baby.
You are not alone.
Yeah. So I
did too.
Yeah, I think most new parents do. And that takes me to my next question, which is, how do you know if you are reaching out to the pediatrician too much? Is there such a thing as too much? I think new parents have a tendency to, like, you know, every funny little breath or every, you know, it could be any number of things, but we feel like all day long sometimes you're like, well, what's this? What's this?
Sure.
What's happening now? She sniffled, she sneezed, she did this. And there, you sort of almost wish you could have your personal pediatrician sort of shadowing you around all day. How do you know if you're overly worried, or are there times when you don't need to call? Is that something pediatricians even worry about, parents who call a lot?
No. I mean, I think the truth is we expect that first-time parents especially are going to have a lot of questions. We try to anticipate a number of those things in those first several office visits. You know, everything from when you should take your baby out in the public for the first time, or, you know, who's allowed to come over to visit, safe sleeping positions, vaccination questions. We try to anticipate as much as we can. And there are themes, there are things that we often hear over and over, so we try to address those. You know, yes, it's normal for your 5-day-old to poop 10 times a day. That's not diarrhea. You know,
and it's a strange color. Is that normal?
Yeah, so we anticipate certain things. And then most pediatricians' offices will have nurses available to go through a variety of things on the phone whenever you call. And then they push them to the doctor when it's necessary. So I have yet to meet a new parent that I thought, ooh, this person calls way too much. We'd rather hear about things early because there are some emergencies. There are some...
And parents, especially new parents, don't always know what those are.
Exactly.
So you're so afraid to miss something
Right.
that later you'll think, oh, that was so important. How did I miss that?
And, on those same lines, I would hate to see a baby 4 days after something big was brewing, when we could have maybe intervened sooner, let's say. So
parents do not need to feel bashful about reaching out.
I think that's why we're here.
Great. Is it important to see the same pediatrician regularly for each well visit? How important is continuity? Some practices have multiple physicians. Maybe you take the one who's available that day. Some families may switch pediatricians. Is continuity relevant in pediatric care?
I think continuity is the ideal that we should all be striving for. It doesn't always happen, of course, because of the doctor availability or convenience, as you mentioned. But I think it's really important for a doctor to get to know your baby, get to know your family. Right. There's things that we might be more apt to look out for because of family history. I think it's really, really important. I love taking care of not just families, but their extended families, because it just gives me a really good sense of what the dynamics might be, or, again, what disease processes I should be looking out for. If I know your cousin had asthma as a 9-month-old.
I never thought about extended families.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Or even if I know your cousin was recently admitted with pneumonia, and now you're a 2-month-old, here with a fever, that just makes me think about things differently. So I love continuity. I think it's important for medical care, and I think it makes it a more positive experience for everybody.
Right.
Patient and physician.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So these days, it seems that a lot of doctors are kind of overscheduled and perhaps spread a bit thin. Gone are the days of house calls where someone, this is generations ago, but someone came over and you probably got a lot of time one-on-one with a person. Often physicians are required to see a large number of patients in a short amount of time, and so consequently appointments can be short. What is the best way for parents to make the most out of the time that they do get with their child's physician?
It's all true. Everything you said is all true.
And I don't want to make a generalization because in my experience, some physicians are able to really take the time and sit down and talk with you. But I've also been in circumstances where it seems as though someone's in and out.
Yeah, I think having a sense of a couple of questions that you need answered before you start the visit would be helpful. When a doctor is asking you, what can I help with today? In those first couple sentences, to make sure that you address your question. And then, of course, please speak up if there is something that is not getting addressed. Yeah. I don't think any doctor wants to leave the room making a parent feel like they haven't had a useful visit or gotten all their questions answered, because a lot of us are parents also, so we know how important those visits are.
Right. Great points. So here's something I've wondered about for a while. This is the day and age of the internet, and parents and patients sort of enter the doctor's office more informed than ever before. And I can see that this could be a real positive or negative thing, depending on the circumstances. So on one side of the spectrum, you have some parents who may really feel like they know what's going on and what's best for their child because they've Googled it a whole bunch of times before they got there. In some cases, even if the pediatrician disagrees. And then on the other side, there are people who see their practitioners as real authority figures, and they don't typically question any of the medical advice they receive. Where does the middle ground lie? How do you feel like when parents come in having done a lot of research? Is that frustrating? Is it useful to you?
Yeah.
I'm dying to know, really.
Yeah.
Because
well, I think it's tricky. It's really tricky. Google and WebMD can, of course, provide some information and some valid information, but there's a context in which we put each patient. It's not just a list of symptoms. It's also their history, their physical exam findings, which parents are often not aware of the details that we pay attention to in terms of physical exam findings. I like when parents are educated. It makes our job a little bit easier for sure.
Yeah.
But I think remember that I would want parents to remember, of course, that we're looking at the whole picture and not just the list of symptoms that they may Google.
Medical school does exist for a reason.
Sure, exactly. There's, we've all been through 4 years of medical school and at least 3 years of residency. And part of residency is seeing the process of disease and watching disease progress over a period of days or weeks. And one moment in time does not necessarily show us the whole picture. So I think it can be helpful. I would hope that parents are seeing a doctor that they trust and that knows them, and a doctor that could take the information the parent is bringing to the visit and then put it into context with the particular patient, the physical exam, and come up with a plan as a team. Because there are situations where we could do more harm than good by, for example, getting a unnecessary CT scan when, it's not necessary.
Right.
And exposing a child to radiation because somebody is worried about a particular finding that they read about on Google, like a tumor or, I'm just thinking of a kind of the extreme situation. So I think to answer your question, it can be useful, but please trust your doctor.
But be open-minded when you get there.
Of course.
Yeah.
And if you're in a situation where you don't trust your doctor, that's when maybe you need to reassess.
Great. So I think we just almost kind of covered part of my next question, which is if you do disagree with the advice or care that your child's pediatrician has offered, what should you do next? How might a parent recognize when or if their child's doctor isn't a good fit for them?
Well, I think at the end of every visit, if it's a sick visit, for example, there should always be some understanding of at what point should I be calling the doctor back, right? Mm-hmm. So part of the advice and the plan will be, let's do X, Y, and Z. But if that's not working, please call me in 2 days or in 5 days.
Yeah.
So sometimes, because disease progresses over time, sometimes we need multiple visits to know for sure what's going on. So I think sometimes it does take a couple visits. But if you really are not on the same page with your child's pediatrician, and you really feel like you're not being heard or you're not comfortable with the plan, I think you do owe it to yourself and to your child to discuss that with the doctor. Mm-hmm. And if you truly in your gut feel like things are not right, then I think it's probably not a great fit in terms of the doctor-patient relationship. The basis of that doctor-patient relationship is trust.
Yes.
And if you don't trust and have faith in your doctor, it's going to be hard for them to provide your child the best care. It's a tough situation, and I would hate to think that a patient of my own would ever want to leave my practice, but at the same time, I want my patients to trust me, and it's just really important.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about early childhood development. Often, just by nature of proximity, it is the parents who first recognize that their child may not be developing typically or reaching typical milestones. What should a parent do if this is the case? Does it warrant? I'm sure it's very situation specific, but if you notice something that doesn't fit an appropriate developmental timeline, does it warrant a special appointment, or is it something that you should simply bring up at your child's next well visit? Especially in early childhood, they tend to go a lot.
Sure, yeah.
What happens when a parent comes to you with concerns of this nature? What's sort of the sequence of events that takes place?
Well, I think that we do, as you mentioned, we do have frequent visits in the first year or two of life for a couple of different reasons. One of them is to make sure that babies are growing well enough. Two would be to make sure that we're vaccinating them on an appropriate schedule to protect them against deadly illnesses. But the third thing is to be following their development, because we can pick up on things so early.
Yes.
So your pediatrician should be asking a couple questions at every visit to make sure that your baby's on track. So the scheduled visits are a great opportunity to cover development. If you're noticing something beyond the age of 2, let's say, that is concerning you, you may not have another well visit for a year. So I probably would call my pediatrician at that point to ask for advice.
Especially between the ages of 2 and 3, because early intervention changes at 3.
Sure,
and so
right.
You want to catch that quickly.
Exactly. So early intervention, as you may know, is this great service provided by the state for children under the age of 3. So under the age of 3, if a child has any developmental delays, be it motor delays in walking or crawling, social delays in their interactions with people, expressive language delays. This service will come to your home, evaluate your child, and then provide the appropriate therapy right in the home. It's a wonderful service. It helps hundreds of thousands of kids every year, but it's only available under the age of 3. So if we pick up on a speech delay after the age of 3, it becomes a little bit more challenging to access services. That's not to say that it's impossible.
Of course, there are other resources. Transition into the special education
sure.
system, and it's different.
With the public schools.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So can pediatricians help when parents have concerns about behavior challenges? Clearly, we think of a visit to your child's doctor if they're having a medical concern. But what about behavior challenges? Is the expertise your pediatrician can provide strictly medical? Can they help with behavior issues?
I think they can absolutely help with behavior issues, and probably the earlier you bring them up, the more helpful they might be able to be.
Yes.
Sometimes behavior issues require just simple tweaks of the way a parent is handling a situation. Sometimes it's a recommendation of a certain book to read or podcast to listen to, perhaps.
Yeah. Maybe this one.
So I would say certainly you should bring it up with your pediatrician. As kids get older, we can also help guide you in the right direction. If they might need a therapist or even just a simple evaluation, we can help guide you to the right place. I see a lot of mental health difficulties in regular pediatric practice, everything from anxiety to ADD, depression, sleep problems. I mean, we see it every day. It's very common in every pediatrician's practice. So we have a lot of experience. We also have access to consultant psychiatrists if that's ever needed, to talk with on the phone or to refer patients to directly.
Great. You just touched on some of the things that you see a lot of in terms of mental health. What are some of the biggest health concerns that you are seeing in the various age group populations right now?
I would say in the teen group, I've seen a real increase in anxiety and depression in the last decade of practice. Things are feeling different in my practice than they did 10 years ago. And, there are probably various reasons for that, but that's probably my biggest concern in that age group. I do worry a lot about social media, and I worry a lot about cell phone use. That is something I try to talk with parents about early on, because I think it is a big struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I think early intervention is important. So, identifying those problems early on and getting kids the services they need early on is the most helpful.
Absolutely. So speaking of teens, at what age does someone need to transition from a pediatrician to a regular doctor? Do people see their pediatricians right through high school, right through age 18?
It varies. The majority of kids, I find, feel comfortable in our office. They usually leave kicking and screaming. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, I find a lot of kids stay through college.
Oh, I didn't realize that they could.
Yeah.
That's great.
There are a couple kids who start feeling uncomfortable in the pediatrician's waiting room, and they feel like it's, they're too old, and they can certainly transition at 18. But I would say the majority of people stay until they're 22.
Interesting.
Once in a while, we'll run into a patient who has a medical problem that maybe we think is best handled by an internal medicine doctor, an adult doctor, and we may make the suggestion to transition sooner. But I would say the majority, it's about early 20s.
Yeah, interesting. College, I did not know that. So when it comes to teens in your practice, does the relationship change with the teens and their parents? Teens obviously have different concerns than younger children do. And what's the confidentiality that takes place between this triangle of, parents, teens, doctor?
Yeah, it gets tricky as they get to be teenagers, because kids usually would like a little bit of privacy.
They want to be independent. Sure. They want to have their own life.
Yeah, and they may have questions about their bodies that they don't necessarily want to ask in front of their parents all of the time. So starting at 13, I usually spend a little bit of time with kids by themselves at their annual visit to give them a chance to ask some questions if they have them, and also to provide a couple of points about potential risks moving forward. And those conversations change as the child gets older. Teens are allowed confidentiality, however, about their sexual health for sure. So that becomes challenging, of course, because parents
do they ask questions?
Do ask questions, and they care about their kids' health, and they want to know what the risks are. sometimes teens grant them that permission to have access to all that information, but that really has to be done in writing for us to share information with parents.
Okay, so the teen can come into your office. They can discuss things freely, and you're not obligated to tell the parent everything that they've told you. There is still that doctor-patient confidentiality.
There is doctor-patient confidentiality between the teen and the doctor.
The provider, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And we always encourage teens to talk with their parents, however, and share the fact that they have become sexually active in some cases, or we always encourage them to disclose things to their parents. But yes, we honor their privacy.
Great.
And by law, we have to.
You have to.
Yeah.
Good to know. Is there anything that you wish parents knew? Not to put you on the spot, but is there something in your practice that you think, things would be easier around here if parents just knew this thing?
I guess one thing that I've probably mentioned a couple times today is for parents of young babies to understand the risks with screen time, early screen time, and just what an impact that can have.
That's such a hot topic right now. Every parent that I talk to anywhere is so concerned about screen time, and you hear a lot about it, and yet people still feel like they don't know what to do. And of course, there are guidelines out there, but they're always so much more difficult to put into practice in daily life than it's just people are so concerned, though.
They're concerned about it, and I think it's hard for parents because in this day and age, most people have help with their child care. They're not doing 100% of their child care necessarily by themselves. So they're relying on other people, either grandparents or aunts and uncles or daycare, to be implementing the same rules, so to speak, as they are at home. And it can just be really hard. I think that would be something that I try to touch on early at the 1-month visit to make sure that we cover it. Just how important it is for babies to witness conversations, for how important it is for them to be spoken to directly, that they learn these early language skills so young.
And if you're if screen time is taking up some of that valuable time in a child's waking hours when they should be
observing or discovering with their hands, or just going for a walk and looking at the trees. I mean, there's just so much that they can learn early on.
Right. I think it was just a couple of days ago, the WHO came out with a study, it wasn't a study, but they gave new recommendations about screen time under the age of 2. I think they said no screen time under the age of 2, which is similar to the AAP in saying, they said 18 months, except for FaceTime.
Talking with
a relative or
abroad,
grandma or grandpa,
which is awesome because that's like a one-on-one interpersonal,
and it's a chance to engage. Yeah. Well, Dr. McManus, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all of your expertise with us. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have as well. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you. For those of you listening, if you have a Torchlight account and you'd like to continue learning about this topic, be sure to check out the e-guide called Consulting Your Child's Pediatrician. That's all for now. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Torchlight's Exceptional Parenting Podcast. Find this and other episodes on iTunes, Spreaker, and Podcast Go. If you're interested in bringing Torchlight Child or any of Torchlight's other caregiving products to your workplace, please contact info@torchlight.care. That's info@torchlight.care.